is May 30th, 1992.
Yes, Dr. Royal Rife here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can, sir.
How may I serve you? I'm representing the other 6 doctors in our circular force of energy, and I understand there are questions begging answers by Mr. Richard.
Okay. Dr. Rife, my understanding, in reading about your work, you put together a dark field or polarized light microscope for observing bacteria or other organisms. And at that time, you also became aware through your clairvoyant vision of vibratory fields as well connected with these microbes you were observing. Is that correct? Was it what we would call today a dark field microscope?
The microscope needed in the invention of bacteria, viruses as they are called, and the escape of the bacteria, though being very minute, was filtering through the normal filters used in separating the bacteria and also widening toward a cure or a relief, I should say, thus discovering that these micro or these minute particles of bacteria that were smaller than what you call the eye of a needle were working through the filters, of which was not discovered until my microscope of refraction brought into larger scope the bacteria that was filtering through what was called undefeatable filters. Thus, this required more of an understanding of vibrational energies and leaning toward the spiritual aspect of humanity, that which would, through specific frequencies of vibration or energy, change the bacteria into a neutral position. And the problem, as stated, was not realizing what was thought to be filter-proof was not so. Is that clear?
Some further questions. In one aspect, we have talked about a microscope for observation. There have also been references to a device that you designed for helping patients, so eliminating problems and diseases. Now, I'm assuming that they are 2 separate instruments. Is that correct?
They are.
Would you just...
One is the discovery of what specific vibration or vibratory rating was initiated in the beginning of that bacteria when it assumed a negative aspect in the total organisms of all life. Thus, it required careful manipulations, and that is not a good word, but a way in which a specific vibratory rating could destroy the bacteria. This required thousands of experiments on our behalf, but finally we did come to where in a ratio of 1 to 10, we could cure practically any disease as long as we knew its vibrational frequency. But then we had to know also that we were not interfering with the law of cause and effect where the patient was concerned. But this I did not feel guilty about and was more concerned within the fields of a disease. So therefore, we are working with the machine materially and what you might call a machine of vibrational response to the disease.
Assuming that there is no karma involved with the illness that an individual has, could you describe how this machine for treating patients was put together?
How do you mean put together?
I don't know what this machine consisted of. It's one of the things I've not been able to find.
The machine used upon the patient in microvolts, you might call it, which only required short treatments at most. Even with the malignancy of cancer in my time, that it required an oscillator as one concern, a dual transformer that could work in any ratio of currency that needed, that affected the bacteria concerned. But this was placed in some form of oscillation of energies used, so that we could, in each bacterium, enter within a cure by the specific ratio of oscillation or vibratory rating needed to destroy or destruct this disease. I notice in entering your world there is more interest within medical procedures now concerning vibrational frequency. And I would hope that in the newer attitudes that form around humanity, this machine might well be used, especially looking into foreign countries where there is so much disease prevalent.
I have some further questions. Were these oscillations given to the patient by attaching electrodes or by setting up an electric or alternating magnetic field around the patient or an appendage of the patient?
There again is dependent upon the receptivity of the patient. I found with those more in a spiritual attention and respect to the energy within the body that the electrodes were not required. Simply the right dialing toward the disease and an oscillation of vibrational frequency that could destroy the bacteria affecting the healthy cells.
So in effect, what you had was a very small, almost radio transmitter.
That is correct. Very versatile in every respect. But then, of course, it met with disapprovals, as you know, and it is not feasible to be able to help humanity when greed seems to be the paramount issue at hand.
There are people presently marketing what they claim to be derivatives or copies of your instrument. I don't know whether any of these are valid, whether they're operating in the right frequency spectrum, but could you give us an idea of the range of oscillations you dealt with for typical diseases?
The frequencies were dependent upon the knowing and studying for many years the specific vibratory rating of the bacteria in question, setting the machine so that there was a projected positive oscillation of force affecting the negative aspect of bacteria, which self-destructed any free radicals moving in and around and through the bacteria and the body itself. The frequencies are in line with the laws of the creative force. So these in turn are respected by what I understand in your world to be the Vishnu force. And each color spectrum along with it was honored because each color is represented within the thought vibrations of any specific individual. But basically, it was incorporating many of these concerns with curing the individual. And I must confess I had not knowledge or understanding of these laws of the universe, and dealt more with these frequencies as I saw them, and gradually could perceive, when I was quiet enough, a clairvoyance in the beyond of what seemed to be the solid energy.
Many people today are concerned about radiated energies. They feel that there are harmful effects that come from many sources, be they radio towers, transmission lines, possibly television sets. I can't comment whether that is true or not. Maybe you can comment on this to us.
Well, it is not healthy working in all of these high voltages that are now surrounding your world, and also the dangers of what you call your fluorescent lighting. I would not respect nor tolerate at any way or at any time. These are very detrimental to the optic nerve and the pulsations of cellular force. And therefore, I frown upon all of these so-called conditions used in the various conveniences of cooking, or those things that pertain to the hair, or things that are to burn your bread. All appliances having a direct effect upon the cells of the body. Therefore, there must be an understanding. The cure for all of this, not the relief, is a country that where using direct current is the most safest way to go, and does not trouble the vibrational frequency of individuals. I feel in some diseases of your humanity is caused by the abuse of electrical and nuclear energies, because they are not direct, and they are not in alignment with the total fullness of man's own electrical force. It's a causation of much heart failure in your world, because electrical current or synapse is not in the sequence of what the organs need to sustain the body in its equilibrium.
When you talked about fluorescent lights being harmful to the optic nerve, most of the time people do not perceive the flicker. But let's assume that there is an effect here that is frequency dependent as far as the harm is concerned. What would happen if we made a solid state fluorescent ballast, say that operated at 40,000 or 20,000 times a second versus 120 or 60?
The question is that electrification of the world should be in direct current, where there is not the alternating phase which affects the synapse of the total body. Therefore, I am in total agreement with not the Edison theory, but of what was the original beginning of wanting direct current, which was defeated by politics of that time period.
If I remember properly, that was Steinmetz.
That is correct.
Okay. Yes, he was pushing direct current power transmissions. And one of the problems we have with direct current transmissions is that we don't have direct current transformers. Transformers seem to work on alternating currents.
Because you're not directed or in tune with the negative aspect of the positive force of electrical energy, of which needs to be grounded in your world. Now, I have talked extensively with Dr. Reich concerning this voltage concern, of which he had and found when he worked with the electrical rods or electricity of life. But if I am in memory of my time on Earth and a comparison of foreign and indeed considerations of United States, isn't it now that England is mostly direct current?
I can't speak for...
I believe I'm correct in this because there was mentions made of it by Dr. Foote, who incidentally is from origins of London. And also, we've had extensive talks in spirit about the electrification of the body and how it is affected negatively by what you call the AC, or alternating current of your country.
I think today the majority of the power distribution in England is alternating. It is 50 cycle rather than 60 cycle, and I think it's 220 volts versus 110 to 120 that we have in this country.
Is that more of a direct oscillation or current?
Well, it's 50 cycles per second instead of 60, but it's still alternating current.
I'm not well versed in these conditions, but I do know that there is much impairment of the optic nerve of the human body by the alternating current, of which is, of course, used in the United States.
Is there a frequency of alternating current that would be less harmful?
It must be of direct nature.
Yes, not.
Of which you will find eventually shall become necessary.
Okay.
I'm stating emphatically what the dangers are of alternating current.
What about using pulsed direct current?
Well, I can't say because I'm not an electrical engineer. I do know that direct current is the affair of the human body, and the negative aspect is alternating current where good health is concerned.
Okay.
Understand, I've learned this in spirit, not what I would have known while in the mortal body.
Fair enough. Darian, why don't you ask some questions while I think a moment?
Okay, I have one question before I start on my questions concerning the book. Dr. Wright, recently China exploded an A-bomb in one of the northern provinces that was 3 to 6 times more powerful than Hiroshima. Can you tell me what direct
Is it above ground or below ground?
Below ground, underground testing, what effects it's having on the Earth right now?
It's changed the frequency of vibration of the molecular structure of all stratas of the Earth, which moves in 7 plates, which in turn is in respect to the laws of creation and the color spectrum as well as the octave of music, which you use as the diatonic scale. This will cause deeper repercussions in what we will call underwater blisters forming that will create giant volcanic eruptions, of which will in turn set off waves of what you term the tidal waves. But I know that it's upset the frequency of what they call the magnetic influence of all creatures of your ocean as well as your land. You will find that your mammals are misdirected, their echoes of what you term your radar are not attuned to the specific compass points which have been disrupted by the nuclear explosion, and thus there shall be more of this problem ahead of the concerns of your world, and also it will affect the rotation of the Earth which will slow it more to a 4 degree than what it's represented in the 7 spectrum of itself as we see it, including your total galaxy. So it is against the laws of nature in all respects to electrical currents and frictions of your world. But that is man's learning procedure, and also it's going to change a great deal of things in your world and take a time for them to be rectified in a proper balance.
Thank you.
Dr. Rife, you said it would change 4 degrees of 7 or 4 cycles of 7. I've come across this reference before. I don't understand it.
Well, 7 cycles of rotation, speaking within the magma of the earth or the center of it, and the 7 vibrational rings that move from the core to the outer crust of the world has caused the normal 7 degree or 7 revolutions of the earth to become slowing to what is 4 degrees or 4 revolutions per minute, and thus affecting the degrees of vibration from the core to the outer crust. Therefore, you will find this affects your weather, your satellites, your sun, and all galaxies or satellites that are surrounding the earth. Man is sitting on a very dangerous condition. But this is what I understand from the forces of spirit or the earth angels, you might say, that have withdrawn from the safety or protection of earthlings.
I guess I have to plead ignorance, because as you speak, I'm trying to make a model in my mind of what is actually going on, and quite frankly, I can't.
Simplify it in this way. Visualizing 7 circles.
Or spheres?
With their perfect 360 degrees, working from the core of your earth to the outer crust of the earth. Each circle represents a different vibratory rating. For example, we see the color red in recognition of what you call fire as the core, or magma as it was called, registering the first vibratory rating in what you call the key of C. This is a neutral color. There's no ricochet of the vibration outward and then reversing to the inner core of the magma itself. So each circle representing a specific vibratory rating in respect to the laws of Vishnu and the color spectrum, and of course the different notes of your diatonic scale.
Is there any relationship here to physical oscillations at all? When we talk about vibratory rating, is the core ringing like a ball flexing in and out, or are we talking about some other type of vibration?
Well, of course, this is the very simple word that describes it all. It's the paste or glue that seems to hold everything in, the force of creation, without the crutch of religion. And it is seen that this paste or this glue is simply stated as recognizing all things in a state of vibratory rating. It is what you would call, there are no 2 fingerprints the same. It's the same in the universe. There are no 2 vibrations that vibrate at a specific frequency, but all things interlock that cause this esoteric concern that is sweeping across your galaxy.
I'm going to make a jump in idea here. I'm going to assume that what you're talking about are changing in forces or laws on a subatomic scale. There has to do with things that relate to actually the nature of matter. Is that correct?
Well, you're getting quite deeply involved in these metaphysical fields of which are inclusive of Einstein's nuclear fusions and also the theory of relativity, which you are oddly presenting maybe from your receiving the forms of conversations we are having in concern of what it is an opposite, that is the up and down, the yes and no, or the sun and the moon. When you look into the total interior of life, there is not a duality. It is in the benefit of humanity that this exists, but outside of it, there is this relativity of all things moving to the ultimate of what is called creation. And this moves to the finer circles of energies. I can't step beyond that. I'm not well versed in that concern.
Getting back to your comment about alternating fields, electrical fields being harmful to individuals, or would it be beneficial for people to have clothing that's somewhat conductive to make like a Gaussian surface on themselves?
Very limited help. But you see, the galaxy operates on direct current, and any object, no matter the smallest grain of sand to the magnitude of creation itself, obeys the direct currents that are found in the various progressions of between the laws of the total universe. But you're getting me in quite deeply because I'm not well versed in these things.
No, the reason I asked the question is that is there any way that even it's so convenient to use alternating current for certain applications, such as electrical discharge for lighting up a bulb, be it a normal fluorescent light or an ultraviolet bulb for purifying air or water, we don't readily have replacements using direct current for this. And I was trying to see if there's a way that we can kind of keep these useful features around and not have them so harmful.
Well, there isn't any way to change the synapse existing between the nerve centers or nerve endings by somehow forming something that would neutralize the conditions of alternating current. But of course, it also looks more deeply into the experience of life itself, where there was a time when your moon was the second sun, and there was not a need for electricity used in the primitive form that humanity uses it, or I used it, because there was a constant daylight of force in what you're probing as solar energy. But then again, I'm not well versed in these conditions, and so I must just say there was a time when the world was a bright globe of full sunlight or atomic light, which was natural and healthy. But artificial primary circuits of electrification are not conducive to the synapse of a body. That much I do know.
It has been mentioned by one of the doctors, possibly yourself, I don't remember, that when we had, I think it was Dr. Reich, in fact, when we had two suns, the sun and the moon as a sun, the women's energy was more balanced than it presently is today. This is not saying that anything deleterious about women, but he was talking about in the world that masculine and feminine energies were more in balance. Could you please comment?
Just exactly what is your question?
Okay, if the moon were actually a sun, I'm going to assume that it had a positive outflow of energy at that point. Would women still have their standard 28-day menstrual cycle, or would anything change?
No, there would not be an end to menstrual cycle, and there would be a continuity of life, staying or living in a body for 8 to 1,000 years. And I have seen and have much respect for the precious force of life, that when it is caused by emotional and limitations of Earth, or crawling to want to extend life to its everlasting fulfillment, and that's of course what medical profession is trying to do. But when there was an abolishment of the acceptance of death, and all lived in a body until such time they wish to replenish it, then we're entering into what I would term, I think, the esoteric principles governing all life. But this would place more of an equality in what is positive elements, but can be interchanged in the process, to where striking the force of vibration of specific receptive action of the femininity, then it could be in a state of conversion where there still is the menstrual cycle, and of course respect to a greater activity of the seminal experiences. But that has not reached into the understanding of humanity, but does lie ahead of you in the new world, I understand, will be over the one you have now.
We have been told that, one, we're either going to lose the moon or it's going to become a sun again. I can't imagine how this happens. Can you help us here?
Well, the sun does not burn. The sun is actually an infinity of chemicals, as you call them, moving through a ring of total, how would I phrase that, a total circular force of all elements that are within your Earth and of the galaxies surrounding it. So you're actually lighting this ring of all elements of Earth, which in turn produces the heat, which you call the sun. And it's very cleverly designed, as I see it, because it could not possibly come to a point where it's totally extinguished. And the only exception is when humanity starts to move into physics they do not understand, that causes a disruption in the vibrational frequencies of the sun. But I'm stepping out of my abilities, but this is what I've seen, and it's a limited knowledge, but it still is very, very true.
Did you say before, Dr. Wright, that the presence of a second sun, along with people's own acceptance of no death, made it possible for the body to keep going and dying?
Certainly. But it's conditioned to materiality and the thoughts of negative and positive and all the theories that do not hold water in the full sense of the word. And don't forget, I am still living in an amazement of what I'm viewing and seeing, and yet in many ways I can't find words to describe what it is.
So when you say the moon becomes a sun, it may not necessarily represent what we perceive as a physical sun?
It would perceive a balance of solar energy working in opposites because it is needed to give the balance of positive energy, which is the requirement of the physical form. But I must away now. My blessing to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.